Good morning and welcome to our viewers joining us from the United States and all around the world. Where Hal Solomon is off, I'm MJ Lee. It's Monday, July 7th, 4 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. Let's get straight to our breaking news. Parts of Texas are bracing for even more heavy rainfall after the catastrophic flooding that's left at least 82 people dead, including 28 children. New video shows the dramatic moment two people were rescued from the raging floodwaters. The El Paso Fire Department says they were clinging to a tree before the rescue. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says flash flooding still poses a threat for some areas as water levels begin to rise again. That prompted officials to urge people in the Hunt community to move to higher ground on Sunday. A local sheriff says more than 400 first responders from more than 20 agencies are part of the mass rescue operation. But the treacherous conditions are making it harder for rescuers to search the area. At last check, officials said at least 41 people were still missing. That includes at least 10 campers and one counselor from Camp Mystic. That's an all-girls summer camp near the Guadalupe River that burst its banks early Friday when most people were still sleeping. Governor Abbott visited the camp and says it was, quote, horrendously ravaged.
It was nothing short of horrific to see what those young children went through. And we will remain 100% dedicated, searching for every single one of the children who were at Camp Mystic, as well as anybody else in the entire riverbed, to make sure that they're going to be recovered.
CNN's Ed Lavandera has more on the rescue efforts from Comfort, Texas.
While the death toll from the flooding continues to go up dramatically, there are still a number of people missing, and because of that, we're seeing large numbers of volunteers fanning out across the Guadalupe River from Camp Mystic all the way downstream to where we are here in the town of Comfort, Texas, some 36 miles away from Camp Mystic. And up and down the river, we've seen groups of people coming out trying to help the search and rescue teams bring those answers and the closure to so many families that are still awaiting news about their loved ones. But this is what they're up against. Look, this is all of the debris just in one little spot. They got washed up here along this bridge that crosses over the river. But you look at the denseness and the thickness of all of this debris, and it just makes you realize how difficult this search operation is. You know, cutting through all of this and trying to find a possible victim in this kind of scene is just incredibly difficult, incredibly taxing. But we've seen all that, and a lot of that was brought to a halt here today because there had been some concerns that there was more flash flooding along coming. There was alerts when causing evacuations of the area, and so that was caused a lot of concern. And because of that, we saw the teams of volunteers here being told to kind of evacuate these areas. So those search and rescue operations and the volunteer efforts kind of came to a halt because of that. And we presume that it will continue because there are still several days out from this tragedy, still many families looking for answers, some still holding on to hope that maybe someone could be rescued alive. But with every passing hour, they know full well that is a very unlikely scenario to unfold here, as difficult as that is to say right now. Ed Lavandera, CNN, Comfort, Texas.
The United Cajun Navy, a volunteer rescue group from Louisiana, has been assisting in the search and rescue efforts. Earlier, my colleague Polo Sandoval spoke to one of its members about some of the issues that they are facing on the ground.
The United Cajun Navy is not giving up yet. There's still hope, still in rescue mode at this point, not in recovery mode. Obviously, the scene is just absolutely heartbreaking. You go and today our guys are out in the riverbed there where the water has receded a little bit, still trying to dig and looking into trucks that are buried. We've seen miracles before. There was a rescue made of a young girl that was swept 12 miles down the river and found up in a tree. Absolute miracle. I mean, it's pretty hard to believe that even happened. Another one of the issues that we're still trying to work out is connectivity. The first responders are still really struggling to connect with each other. Even radios don't work. Cell coverage is out in lots of different places. So we've been outfitting vehicles with Starlink. Like, we just got a bunch of them today to outfit every single sheriff's deputy vehicle in Kerr County. So we're working on that as well. We're installing them ourselves, making sure they all run and work. We're going to be hooking their radios up to those as well. So they'll be able to actually use those radios to communicate car by car, with a Wi-Fi connection to Starlink. And so we're hoping that's going to help out a lot. But, a lot of these efforts have been hampered by the lack of communication. And I'm hoping by tomorrow, we'll have put a lot of that to bed.
Now, in terms of some of the complications, you mentioned comms right now. You mentioned Starlink, which for some of our viewers, it's that system that relies on satellite technology for comms. What other sort of obstacles and challenges are you all facing right now? Is it the infrastructure in jeopardy here, like roads? Is it the new round of warnings that have been issued by authorities about further possible flooding?
Oh, absolutely. Today, a lot of rescue workers had to pull out of the area and get to higher ground because there were reports of a wall of water that was headed right downstream, straight back at Kerrville. And as you can imagine, after what we saw the other day, the ground is super, super saturated. It doesn't take much to get that water level back up. And just as dangerous as it was that day, it takes a lot less water to do that. And so when you get reports like that, it's obviously, it's pretty terrifying. And then the job turns into making sure civilians are totally out of those areas, making sure they heed the warnings. And they have to be taken seriously. The warnings have to be absolutely have to be taken seriously. And most people did, which was definitely great. And luckily, not much came. It was the best case scenario. Very happy for that. And the weather is looking up for the next few days, which is something that everybody here has been looking forward to.
If you'd like to help those affected by the flooding in Texas, please go to cnn.com/impact. There you can find resources for donations, and you'll be connected to charities that are on the ground there right now. One climate scientist says the U.S. is unprepared for worsening natural disasters as the planet continues to warm. Meteorologist Chris Warren explains the key causes behind the catastrophic floods in Texas.
It really is hard to imagine how something like this could happen. And in this case, a lot of different things came together to create this disaster. One of those was the drought. Days, if not weeks in the making. And you might say, well, why would a drought make flooding worse? Wouldn't that be more water in, to the soil, more room? Well, it doesn't necessarily work that way. With the very hot and very dry conditions, the soil kind of gets baked and it gets hard. So initially you get this downpour of water and it doesn't go right into the soil. It just runs off. And you think of how big the land is, if it would go right into the soil, that would at least help. But in this case, there were a lot of things going against the situation here. So another one would be once the rain started, it was tapping into moisture, not just from the Gulf, which helps make things very humid in Texas anyways, but a couple of these former tropical systems add a little bit extra juice. So there's another thing. The other aspect of it, it was slow moving. The overall system that was helping to trigger these showers and thunderstorms just wasn't moving very fast. And then the location, right? We knew there was going to be storms and possibly flash flooding, but the fact that this bad, horrible storm set up right here, right over the north and south forks of the Guadalupe River that feed into here. Anything that falls from the sky, any rain, any water is going to drain that way. And it was hours and hours of some of the heaviest rain you could even imagine. And it all ended up being well over 10 inches in some areas, around a foot in some spots, estimated by radar, and it's over several counties. So that water drains out in many cases into the same locations. And because of that, in just a matter of hours, going from, this is the river gauge here, the Guadalupe River at Kerrville, going from less than a foot, below a foot water level, to about a 2-story house in a matter of couple of hours. That's all of that rain being funneled down the stream there. And then this is the forecast. Not completely done just yet. Still have showers and thunderstorms to get through during the day tomorrow. But eventually, by tomorrow evening, things start to dry out. And fortunately, really going to get a break. It's going to be hot, but back to a dry stretch next week.
Tropical depression Shantel made landfall in South Carolina on Sunday. It's now become the first named storm to strike the Atlantic coast of the U.S. this hurricane season. More than 5 million people in North Carolina were under flood alerts by the early morning hours yesterday. And Virginia also put at least 2 million people under flash flood warnings. As the storm tracks deeper inland, rain is expected to push further north later this week. Shantel was recently downgraded from a tropical storm, but it's still inflicting heavy damage on coastal communities. This image on screen shows a collapsed highway amid major flooding in central North Carolina. Still to come, the very latest on the deadly floods in Texas. Plus, could Israel and Hamas reach a ceasefire agreement this week? We'll bring you the details of the Israeli Prime Minister's upcoming meeting with President Trump and the renewed talks taking place in Qatar. Stay with us. A recap of our breaking news. At least 82 people, including 28 children, have been killed by flash floods in central Texas. State and local officials say 41 people are missing. Most of the victims were in Kerr County, where the Guadalupe River rose more than 20 feet in the span of hours. Some of the youngest victims died at Camp Mystic, a Christian all-girls summer camp located on the riverbank. Search and rescue operations continue for a camp counselor and 10 campers who are still missing. Indirect negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage release between Hamas and Israel restarted in Qatar on Sunday, a diplomatic source tells CNN. The renewed talks come as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet with President Trump today, and they are set to expect the latest hostage ceasefire proposal. Just before boarding his flight to the U.S. on Sunday, Netanyahu said President Trump, quote, can help move us closer to a ceasefire agreement, but reiterated some of Israel's non-negotiables.
So far, we have freed 205 out of 255 hostages, including 148 alive. There are 20 living hostages remaining and 30 deceased. We are determined to bring them all back. We are also determined to ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel. This means we will not allow a situation where there are more kidnappings, more murders, more beheadings, more invasions. It means one thing: the elimination of Hamas's military and governmental capabilities. Hamas will not be there. I am committed to all three missions together: the release and return of all our hostages, both living and deceased, the elimination of Hamas's capabilities, removing them from there, and ensuring that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel.
For more on this, we go live now to London with Paul Selim, Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute. Paul, very good to have you. I want to ask you first how you are watching the Prime Minister's visit to the White House today. For starters, do you think President Trump sees this as a meeting to sort of close the deal on a Gaza ceasefire? And is the Prime Minister anywhere amenable to that right now?
Well, this is the third visit by Prime Minister Netanyahu to President Trump. Their relationship is an interesting but complex one. They're both strong men, but they're also competitors in many ways. And they will be dealing with two issues during this visit. One is the ceasefire and long-term arrangements for Gaza, and the other is what are the next steps for Iran. I do think that they're in agreement about at least the 60-day ceasefire, although in the long run, they probably have different visions.
Yeah, and you heard just there what the Prime Minister said right before traveling here to the U.S., that he is certainly determined to bring all of the hostages back, but that at the same time, what Israel's goals are in the broader conflict basically remain the same. I just wonder what you think the families of the hostages, hearing those comments from the Prime Minister, what their reaction might be. I mean, do you think they hear that and think the Prime Minister treats the return of the hostages as his number one priority?
Well, I don't want to speak for them, but they've spoken for themselves, or at least many of them have. And from the early months of this conflict, many of them have accused the Prime Minister of not prioritizing the return of hostages above all else. but rather prioritizing the war with Hamas at any cost. That has included great devastation to the Palestinian, over 60,000 killed, hundreds of thousands injured, 2 million displaced. And it's also probably contributed to the death of many of those Israeli hostages. And as you know, that has continued to fuel a deep divide politically inside Israel.
And as you know, this is the first time the two leaders are seeing each other in person since the U.S. and Israel launched joint attacks on Iran and Iran's nuclear program. It's fair to expect, I think, that we'll probably see a victory lap of sorts, though these Oval Office meetings have been quite unpredictable lately. How do you think the Trump-Netanyahu relationship and really the power dynamics between the two men have shifted since those attacks?
Well, I think they've shifted in favor of Prime Minister Netanyahu. When President Trump was first elected back in November, Prime Minister Netanyahu was very wary of President Trump. He immediately got to a ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah in Lebanon on Trump's insistence, even before he became president. And in the final hours before Trump took over in the White House, he agreed to a ceasefire with Hamas, which he had not wanted to do previously. He also held off for 2 months on Trump's insistence from attacking Iran. But I think since the attack on Iran, which in military terms went probably better than many expected on the Israeli side, Trump felt himself that Netanyahu was, stealing the limelight and rushed to join that military campaign. So Trump will want to say that he really was the decisive factor in Iran, but both of them face the long-term challenge. The Iranian nuclear program is still there. It's weakened, but there isn't a clear solution yet to the Iranian nuclear program.
That's interesting. So, Paul, are you not of the belief that perhaps Prime Minister Netanyahu heads into this meeting feeling like he owes the U.S., owes President Trump and the Trump administration for those attacks on Iran?
No, I do feel that, and I think he will allow President Trump to claim a lot of credit for the more impactful strikes on certainly the big nuclear reactors and enrichment areas in Iran. He will grant him that. I think he already, Prime Minister Netanyahu, while leaving Israel, gave President Trump a lot of credit, saying that he will help us get to a ceasefire agreement in Gaza. So yes, I think on the PR level, he will grant this to President Trump. But the strategic disagreements between Trump and Netanyahu will continue in Gaza. Trump wants a final end to this war, not a temporary ceasefire in the long run. Netanyahu doesn't want that. Trump wants to go ahead with a deal between the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and Israel, which will require significant concessions to the Palestinians. Netanyahu doesn't want that. And finally, President Trump wants a negotiated deal with Iran to manage the nuclear program, not an open-ended war. And Netanyahu disagrees with that as well.
Yeah, many potential headlines that could come out of this White House meeting. Paul Selim, thank you very much. Welcome back. More now on our top story. At least 82 people have now been killed in the flash flooding in central Texas. At least 41 others are still missing. The National Weather Service is warning that more rain is headed for the state, with up to 10 inches possible in some areas. And the flooding could still get worse in Kerr County, where the majority of the destruction has taken place. Search and rescue crews are still searching for at least 10 campers and a counselor who are missing from Camp Mystic, an all-girls summer camp near the Guadalupe River. It took less than 2 hours for that river to rise more than 20 feet, or about 6 meters. The mayor of Kerrville says the city is doing everything it can to help those affected by the floods.
I'm old enough to remember Fred Rogers. And he one time said, during a crisis, look for the helpers. In Kerrville, those helpers are the city staff, county personnel, state agencies, and federal agencies. We're doing everything we can.
CNN's Isabel Rosales shows us the damage in Kerr County, where rescue crews are working to find more survivors from the flooding.
You You can see this helicopter scanning the area here where there's a body of water right over there past that road. This is a rock quarry where I saw earlier police, EMS, firefighters, volunteers using shovels and digging in there through the mud, through the loose gravel. I'm told that they found 3 RVs in this area, one of which was flipped over and buried in the mud. So they're trying to dig that out to see if there's anyone there who's inside. They've also told me that they pulled off a license plate from the RV so that they can help track down who these RVs belong to as well. Part of the major problem here for any search and rescue operation is this nonstop rain. As soon as the rain and the lightning started to come in, we saw those volunteers and rescuers scatter for their protection. I know that they'll be back with heavier equipment to help dig out that RV and make sure that there's nobody inside. Back to you.
President Trump is pledging continued federal support for the Texas following devastating floods, but he stopped short of commenting on the future of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. CNN's Kevin Liptak has more reaction from the White House.
President Trump says he will probably visit the affected areas of Texas on Friday. He actually said he wanted to visit this weekend, but decided against it because he thought the security apparatus could affect the search and rescue efforts there. The president is calling what is happening horrible and says the federal government will continue to assist state and local authorities as they deal with this tragedy. The president signed a major disaster declaration for Texas on Sunday, and what that did is unlock federal resources for the community there. It allows FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to begin its work on the ground. The U.S. Coast Guard has also deployed resources there, including 2 helicopters, 3 fixed-wing aircraft, which have thermal cameras able to detect movement on the ground that might not be visible to the naked eye. FEMA has also set up 7 shelters, which, as of 1 p.m. on Sunday, were housing 137 people. President Trump, in his letter to Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, wrote a handwritten addendum in Sharpie saying that our wonderful Secretary Kristi Noem is available at all times. Kristi Noem, obviously the Secretary of Homeland Security. Now, there are some questions being raised about staffing levels at the National Weather Service. Some critical positions were left vacant after their occupants decided to take early retirement initiatives offered by the Trump administration as they have worked to reduce the size of the federal government. One of the positions is a warning coordination meteorologist at the Austin, San Antonio office of the National Weather Service. Now, it is not a definitive answer of whether these positions, if they were filled, could have changed anything on the ground there, but it is certainly something that will be scrutinized going forward. President Trump also addressed some of these questions on Sunday. Listen to what he said.
Do you think that the federal government needs to hire back any of the meteorologists who were fired in the last few months?
I wouldn't know that. I really wouldn't. I would think not. This was the thing that happened in seconds. Nobody expected it. Nobody saw it. Very talented people are there, and they didn't see it. It's, I guess they said once in 100 years they've never seen anything like this. So I wouldn't, I mean, people are trying to blame the school. They're trying to blame the camp. They're trying to blame. It's just a horrible thing. But no, I wouldn't say that, no.
Now, President Trump was also asked if he still plans to phase out FEMA. Remember, his goal is to eliminate that agency and put more responsibility on states for preparing and recovering for disasters. Those changes were set to go into effect after this year's Atlantic hurricane season. The president declined to answer that question. He said that FEMA is busy working and that it was a question for another time. Kevin Liptak, CNN, the White House.
After a 90-day pause on his reciprocal tariffs, Donald Trump says his administration will begin sending out letters starting later today to all U.S. trading partners without a deal in place. Trump says the take it or leave it letters will detail the tariff rates countries will have to pay for goods exported to the U.S. starting at the beginning of August. In April, Trump announced a base tariff rate of 10%, with some countries facing an additional 50%. And now he says it's time for a deal.
Out on Monday having to do with the trade deals. It could be 12, maybe 15. You know, Secretary of Commerce right here. And I guess, Howard, I would say it could be maybe as many as 15 or so. And they'll be going out on Monday, and some will go out on Tuesday and Wednesday, and and we've made deals also. So we're going to have a combination of letters, and some deals have been made.
Let's take a look at the U.S. stock futures now. In pre-market trading, the Dow is down around 60 points. The S&P 500 is down nearly 30 points. And the Nasdaq, as you see there, is down around 140 points. And joining me now is Natasha Lindstad, professor of government at the University of Essex in England. Very great to have you this morning. President Trump, as you know, got his top domestic priority through the passage of the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. And coming out of that, we've seen this serious rift between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Musk going as far as to say over the weekend that he's going to create a third political party. Will he go through with it? And so what if he does?
So it's a good question if he's going to go through with it. He says that he's going to. I mean, he has a few things going in his favor. That recent poll by Qantas Insights showed that 40% of Americans could, in theory, support Elon Musk's new party. You also have a growing number of independents. So officially, there's 32% of Americans that are registered as independents, but 43%, according to Gallup polls, identify as independents. And there's also the fact that Musk has hundreds of millions that he could spend to bankroll candidates, and he could sort of mimic the grassroots efforts that is needed usually to start a new party. We saw that he was able to outsource a lot of the get the vote out effort for Trump's presidential campaign, so he might be able to do something similar here. But of course, historically, third parties haven't done well in the U.S. You have, the 1912 Teddy Roosevelt's Progressive Party, or Ross Perot's Reform Party, which he formed in 1995, 3 years after he ran for president, where he did get 19% of the votes, but he didn't get any electoral votes. And these third parties tend to be very personalized, very personalistic. And if we just think about Elon Musk as a person, his approval rating isn't very high. His disapproval rating is somewhere around 60%, and it's actually trending in the wrong direction. But he may be able to disrupt, particularly in these 2026 midterms, where you have some tight House races. We see that Andrew Yang's Forward Party, which has far less resources, has been able to elect a handful of representatives, like a state senator from Utah. So with all this money, and with the fact that many Americans are really frustrated, he might be able to win some close, tight House races, and he might be able to impact policy of those that are frustrated with the Big Beautiful Bill and all of the additions to the national debt and deficit.
And do you sense that all of this could also be leading towards some kind of political run of his own for Elon Musk? He does have a real following, as you were talking about, and he certainly has unlimited resources.
I'm not sure what he would actually be able to run for, but I think he might be able to support candidates that have a chance of really affecting what the Republican strategy is, and possibly even the Democrat strategy. I mean, you're right to point out that he loves attention, that he likes to put himself in the spotlight quite a bit, but not being an American citizen, that would rule out running for president. I'm not sure what other level of office he could actually run for. I think he's going to try to just influence policy and really disrupt the two-party system the best that he can, if he manages to actually get all the signatures that are needed on every state ballot to do so.
And let's just turn to tariffs for a second. President Trump's 90-day deadline that he set for countries to make trade deals with the U.S. is now just around the corner. A lot of confusion about what will actually happen once we are past that deadline. And Natasha, the potential economic ramifications are huge.
No, definitely. I mean, I know that the US is trying to negotiate with the EU, which obviously works as a bloc, and they said that they will retaliate if the US imposes these tariffs. At some points, Trump has said that the EU is incredibly nasty and difficult to work with, and that he could impose tariffs as high as 50%, but the EU will retaliate. I think what the EU is hoping for, that they can get some sort of deal like the UK has with the US, where tariffs are nowhere near as high. On the automobile industry, the tariffs in the UK are somewhere around 10%, and on the steel industry, somewhere around 25%, whereas the global level is around 50%. But all of this, of course, has impacts on the markets, because what the markets don't like are, they don't like tariffs in general, but they also don't like uncertainty. And there is a lot of uncertainty because the only two trade frameworks that are in place between the US and other countries are with the US and the UK and the US and Vietnam. So all of this is hurting the dollar's performance, and it is affecting investors because they just have to deal with a situation where there's just too much chaos.
Yeah, certainty is definitely what many investors would like to see at this point. Natasha Lindstad, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Still to come, Central Texas facing the threat of more flash floods as search and rescue workers continue to look for survivors. Plus, a verdict has been reached in Australia's mushroom murder trial. We'll have details in a live report. And we are following new developments in Australia, where the jury in the mushroom murder trial has delivered its verdict, finding Aaron Patterson guilty on all counts. The 50-year-old was charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder after feeding her in-laws a beef Wellington lunch made with poisonous death cap mushrooms 2 years ago. CNN's Ivan Watson has the latest on this from Hong Kong. Ivan, some of the details from this trial are just so remarkable. What's been the reaction to this guilty verdict?
Right. Well, I mean, this was a small-town murder trial that attracted international attention, I think, in large part because of the circumstances here, that the chief suspect, now proven guilty, according to a 12-person jury, for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. There's no question that nearly 2 years ago, she invited a group of her in-laws to lunch, and 3 of them died of poisoning. And there was no doubt what killed them. It was death cap mushrooms, which had been put into these dishes of beef Wellington. The suspect, Aaron Patterson, she has pled not guilty. She insists it was all a tragic mistake, that she used to hunt mushrooms as a hobby, and they got mixed up in the rest of the food. But the prosecution argued that this was premeditated, that she deliberately put poisonous mushrooms in the food, that she made up a pretext, lied, saying that she had cancer as an excuse to invite her in-laws to this lunch, that she then pretended to be sick and then tried to cover up what happened by remotely wiping her phone after it had been taken into police custody, when she threw away a dehydrator that had her fingerprints on it and had remnants of the death cap mushrooms in it, and again, pretended to be sick and recovered. So in the end, the motive was not revealed here. That was not required here. Aaron Patterson did testify that she had lied to police in panic, she testified, but that wasn't enough. The jury settled now. They decided after 6 days of deliberations to unanimously judge Patterson was guilty, again, on 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. This attracted international attention. It was the subject of 4 podcasts. And the convicted killer now has 28 days to challenge this guilty verdict. MJ.
Really dramatic details there. Ivan Watson in Hong Kong, thank you. And we'll be right back.